Hi all, Scott Adler, Dean of the Graduate School. We're just about to start the 3MT competition. I'll give about 30 more seconds for people to arrive. All right, why don't we get started? Hi all, welcome to the 5th annual 3-Minute Thesis competition. I'm Scott Adler, Dean of the Graduate School, and it's great to have you join us today. This is one of my favorite events of the year. It's really a wonderful opportunity to showcase the incredible work of our graduate students. These young scholars are engaging in vital and cutting-edge research, but for the most part, the only people who know about their amazing work are a small group of specialists in their discipline. So that's not just a shame, but in many ways, it's a missed opportunity to advance the understanding of science, the value of research, and the remarkable scholarship going on at CU. So in an effort to overcome these deficiencies, we're increasingly placing more emphasis on scholarly communication, the ability to summarize very sophisticated and sometimes obscure data and analysis for a general audience. Fortunately, for almost everything we do as scholars and artists, the essence of the research, really the question to be answered, is usually very relatable. So the 3-minute thesis functions as sort of the elevator pitch of academia, presenting research in an accessible fashion. Learning how to do this is no easy task and requires training and practice. Starting last fall, 30 graduate students began a series of workshops to prepare for this competition. These workshops were focused on storytelling, writing, presentation skills, and even one on improv comedy. As you can see, our 11 finalists competing today have worked very hard to get here. Their presentations are really fabulous. Today's winner will receive $1,500 in research funds and the opportunity to advance to the regional 3MT competition, which will be held virtually on March 23rd. Now let me introduce our MC for today's event. My longtime friend, Bud Coleman, is the Roe Green Professor of Theater and Associate Dean for Faculty Affairs in the College of Arts and Sciences. Bud will introduce our judges and set the stage for the competition. Welcome, Bud, and thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much, Scott. It's a pleasure to see you and a pleasure to see our audience, and I can't wait to hear what our 11 finalists are going to present for us today. Welcome to the University of Colorado 3-Minute Thesis Academic Competition. Thank you, our audience, for your support of CU graduate students. The 3-Minute Thesis Academic Competition, or 3MT, was founded by the University of Queensland in 2008. 3MT cultivates students' presentation and research communication skills and challenges them to describe their research to a general audience in only 3 minutes. To give you an idea of the challenge that they have, an average dissertation is about 80,000 words. Now that would take about 12 hours to read out loud. Our students today have only 3 minutes to describe their entire research. So you see the Mount Everest that they're looking at. The popularity of this competition has increased, and 3MT competitions are now held in over 600 universities and institutions in 63 countries worldwide. This is the 5th year of the competition here at CU. As Scott mentioned, our first place winner today will receive $1,500 in research funds and will represent CU at a regional competition next month. We also have a runner-up who will receive $750 in research funds, and we have a People's Choice winner who will receive $500 in research funds. Now the rules for this competition are really pretty simple. First of all, a single static PowerPoint slide is permitted, no slide transitions, animations, or movement of any kind, and the slide must be on screen from beginning to the end. No additional electronic media, so no sound or video files are permitted. No props, so no costumes, musical instruments, laboratory equipment are permitted. The presentations are limited to 3 minutes maximum, and competitors who exceed the 3 minutes will be disqualified. And presentations must be done in spoken words, so no poems, raps, or songs. That's for another competition. First off, I would like to thank these 11 graduate finalists for accepting the 3MT challenge and for sharing their wisdom and passion with us today. On behalf of the graduate school and these amazing presenters, I want to thank you, our audience, for zooming in on a Wednesday afternoon to support intellectual inquiry, scientific discovery, artistic creation, and the dissemination of that knowledge to the public. Now, it is my great pleasure to introduce to you our esteemed judges. First up, we have Jennifer Constable. She is the former Assistant Vice Chancellor of Marketing and Creative Services for Strategic Relations and Communications. Thank you, Jennifer, for joining us. Next up, we have Sana Demijian, Director of the Renee Crown Wellness Institute and Professor of Psychology and Neuroscience. Thank you, Sana, for joining us. Next up, we have Ryland Rabaka, Founding Director of the Center for African and African American Studies and Professor of African, African American, and Caribbean Studies. Thank you, Ryland. And next up, we have Massimo Ruzzini, Associate Dean for Graduate Programs in the College of Engineering and Applied Science and Professor of Mechanical Engineering. Thank you, Massimo, for joining us. While we have this amazing esteemed panel of judges, you, our viewers, all have the opportunity to vote on the People's Choice Award. So take notes during the 11 presentations this afternoon. We will post a URL where you can place your vote that will be posted at the end and will be shown on a screen for 10 minutes once the final contestant has finished. So take notes because you'll have a chance to record your own vote this afternoon. The focus of 3MT is storytelling in its purest form. One human being using the spoken word to introduce their audience to new ideas, new concepts, to new ways of seeing the world. We are so glad that you joined us in our virtual meeting space to sit around the fire to hear what our community members want to share with us today. So, without further ado, I'm going to welcome our first student presenter to the stage today, Ofer Dugan. The title of their presentation is Efficient Data Sharing in Robot Teams. Ofer is a PhD student in the SMED Aerospace Engineering Sciences.
Thank you. Imagine that you're at the store shopping from your list. You ask a worker to help you find the flower. This worker has in their mind a model of how the inventory is organized, for example, by aisles. Now, if they just throw all their information at you, listing what is in every aisle, you might get overwhelmed. It's unhelpful and time-consuming. You expect them to summarize only the relevant information and tell you that the flower is in aisle 2. For a team of robots that needs to work together, this human capability is not trivial. Their ability to make sense of a constantly changing and possibly extreme environments, such as in space or underwater, by collecting large amounts of data from sensors like cameras or lasers, is much less effective than what our brain does. For these robots to help each other and collaborate, they need to decide what information to share and whether the information they received is reliable or should be ignored. In current methods, robots naively share all the information they have, irrespective of how relevant it is to their teammate. This limits the types of missions we can use them for and the number of teammates a robot can have. These methods assume all robots are identical and work on the same task. In practice, we want to use different types of robots with a variety of capabilities that work on complementary tasks to make capable teams. In my research, I developed fundamental theories and algorithms to allow efficient collaboration between robots. We found that in many robotic applications, we can split the tasks a robot have into ones that they have in common and ones that are specific to each robot. Robots can then share information in only the common tasks, reducing the computation and communication load by more than 90%. This allows for efficient collaboration on a variety of applications, such as exploring unknown environments on Mars or on the ocean floor, or for search and rescue tasks in disaster zones, for example. To illustrate, let's take ocean exploration. We have one robot moving on the ocean floor and another swimming above. With current, a common task can then be exploring rocks, while a specific task for the swimming robot might be to also explore fish. With current methods, the swimming robot must share all its information, shouting, I saw a fish, every time it sees a fish. But with my research, it is able to share only a fraction of its information, the relevant fish, the relevant rocks, ignoring the fish. Just like the worker telling you where the flower is, sparing you the entire inventory. Thank you.
And thank you, Ofer. In order to give our judges time to make notes, I'm going to ask each one of the presenters a couple of questions after their presentation, which also gives you, our audience, a chance to get to know these amazing people just a little bit better. So, Ofer, my first question for you today is, I know you grew up in Israel and went to university there. What do you miss most about Israel while living in Boulder?
Except for family and friends, I think food. Yeah, I'm a food person. I don't show it very much, but I think I like to eat. And yeah, the food there is different than here. Not that I don't like American food also, but I think food is the toughest thing.
What food do you miss most?
I think hummus, falafel, the Israeli kind of more street food and the taste. It's a combination of Israeli and more Arabic or Mediterranean food.
Sure. Well, can't wait to visit sometime. Ofer, I understand that you have two daughters, 2.5 and 5.5 years old. Did they help you practice for your 3MT competition today?
If by help you mean they challenged me to stay focused with the different divergence, then yeah. But no, mostly my partner, she helped me the most in practicing on her. She heard it a number of times, many times.
Well, and you might be surprised, your two daughters may repeat some of your presentation back to you sometime later this week.
Maybe, yeah. I saved them to hear that, there.
So I understand that you took up running during the pandemic. Where are some of your favorite places to run in Boulder?
I actually live in Louisville, so yeah, and one of my favorite places almost burned down. So it's not now. It's kind of depressing to run there. It's next to neighborhoods that are not there anymore. So yeah, now it's the motivation is even more difficult. With cold and the area there is closed now. It's challenging. Yeah.
Oh, I totally hear you. Well, Ofer, thank you so much for being our first presenter today.
Thank you.
The good news is now you get to relax as your colleagues take the stage.
Thank you.
Thank you again. Next up, we have Obadiah Disran Satha. The title of his presentation today is How to Stop HIV/AIDS. Obaya is a PhD student in molecular, cellular, and developmental biology.
Thanks, Bert, for introducing me. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. I hope that you're all doing fine during this pandemic. Today, I'm going to talk about how to stop HIV virus and AIDS disease. AIDS has killed more than 36 million people already, and it is not done yet. Do you know that 1 in every 200 humans is currently living with HIV? In fact, by the end of my 3-minute talk, 4 people will be killed by AIDS and 8 people will be newly infected by HIV. Therefore, it is very important to stop this deadly disease. To do that, we need to know how these viruses came into humans. Please look at the first panel or leftmost panel. For many centuries, there have been immunodeficiency viruses living in chimpanzees, and some humans hunted and ate those chimpanzees. Because of blood-to-blood contact, the virus jumped into humans, and this gave rise to HIV. Now, let me tell you a similar story, but with completely different outcome. Please look at the middle panel. For many centuries, there are immunodeficiency viruses living in vervet monkeys, and baboons hunt and eat vervet monkeys regularly in the wild. But strangely, the virus cannot jump into baboons. Why are baboons not infected by immunodeficiency viruses? Is the question that I have asked myself during my PhD. And I have found that there is a powerful gene in baboons called TRIM5 alpha, and that stops the immunodeficiency viruses. Now, let's understand how this gene stops or how this gene works. Please look at the right uppermost panel. During infection, this virus releases a green egg-like structure into the cells. Baboon TRIM5 alpha proteins, shown in purple color, bind strongly to the virus egg and crushes the virus to death. But unfortunately, human TRIM5 alpha is unable to do the same. But if we can understand the differences between baboon and human TRIM5 alpha genes, then we can make a hybrid TRIM5 alpha gene, which looks like human gene, but is powerful like baboon gene. And that is what I'm currently working on. Once we have that hybrid gene, next we need a safe and effective gene therapy technology to deliver the hybrid gene into AIDS patients. And there are many beautiful brains across the planet working towards that goal, and some of them are very close. Therefore, I am hopeful that in near future, we are going to cure AIDS and stop HIV. And that day, we will be able to save more than 40 million human lives. Thank you very much for listening.
And thank you, Obaya. So, Obaya, I know you grew up in India and went to university there. What do you miss most about India during your time here in Boulder?
I think I like my village a lot, sir. So I always miss my village, my home, my parents, my friends, childhood friends. So I definitely want to visit sometime soon, sir. It's been a couple of years since I've been to India in near future.
I hope you get home soon so you can see them again.
Thank you, sir.
I understand that one of your favorite foods is idli. I looked it up and it sounds absolutely delicious. Would you please describe it?
Yes, sir. It's made with rice and some other lentil. It's cooked in steam, no oil. It's completely healthy. So I like it a lot. It's very healthy food. It's considered as very healthy.
And do most people eat it as a breakfast food or a snack?
Oh, yes, sir. It's a breakfast food. People serve with chutney, something like that, or some vegetable soup, something like that. And the combination is good.
I had never heard of it, but I looked it up and it just sounds amazing. I'd love to try it.
Thank you, sir. It's a famous South Indian dish, sir. South India, they have lots of breakfast varieties, sir. They are famous for that.
Well, it sounds amazing. I know that one of your hobbies is drawing and pencil sketching. Are there particular subjects that you are attracted to draw?
Uh, I usually draw human faces, sir. So uh, I think I'm quite good at that. I won lots of awards at school and college level.
And have you been able to continue this hobby while being a graduate student in MCDB?
A little bit, sir. My time is mostly compromised because of my research. Even my personal time is compromised. But every now and then, if I have a chance, I'll try to do that.
Good. Well, I hope once you graduate, you'll have more time to pursue this passion.
So, thank you.
And thank you very much for being our second contestant today.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Amanda Hampton. The title of her presentation is Dialing into Chaos. Amanda is a PhD student in applied math.
Chaos. It's everywhere. In the movement of planets in space, gases in the atmosphere, and even cream in our morning coffee. Chaos describes how sensitive moving objects are to being pushed or pulled a little bit, and can result in seemingly random behavior. For example, theoretically, you can flip a coin 100 times and have it always land on tails. But we all know that's nearly impossible. That's because that coin is extremely sensitive to how you hold it, how you flip it, and even your environment. But the result isn't completely random either. At least we know it's going to land on heads or tails. It's not going to land on orange. So there is some pattern. This is an important feature of chaos. Not only is it sensitive movement, but it's also patterned movement. All types of movement have some amount of chaos, but taking chaos into account when modeling movement is really difficult. So we often just ignore it. And ignoring chaos is at the core of a lot of unsolved problems, like predicting extreme weather events or creating safer, cleaner, and more efficient nuclear energy. I am a mathematician and I study chaos. I think of the amount of chaos in a system as a dial. At 0, there's no chaos. Think of a coin at rest. If we turn that dial up a bit, there's some chaos. Think of just one person flipping a coin. Most research in chaos tries to keep dialing up towards the middle, where we'd find those unsolved real-world problems. And there has been some progress using this approach, but unfortunately not enough to be practical. In my research, I take the opposite approach. Instead of starting at 0 and dialing up, I start at 100 and dial down. And at 100, there's only chaos. And I mean a million snakes flipping coins while riding unicorns, getting tethered by a spaceship, getting chased through asteroids. Kind of chaos. Clearly, this is not a real world scenario, but that doesn't mean we can't learn from it. Remember, chaos is patterned. I have figured out a way to simplify this wacky space unicorn coin flipping situation to the simple pattern found at its core, the pattern of flipping one single coin. And now that I found that pattern at 100, I can start dialing down and ask questions like, can I dial down to those real world problems? Could I get all the way to 0? Will that dial turn smoothly or is it gonna get stuck? Will that same coin flipping pattern persist or will I find a different pattern? These are all questions we mathematicians love. And as we learn more about this chaotic dial, we'll find answers that'll help us better understand the chaos around us, whether it's in the palm of our hand, at a scientific lab, or even somewhere that's just completely out of this world. Thank you.
And thank you, Amanda. Like Ofer, I know that you also enjoy running. Where are some of your favorite places to run in Colorado?
Great question. So I actually just moved back to Colorado this winter, so I haven't been able to run too much. The mountains are calling though. It's so you can see them, they're beautiful, and you want to be in them. So we'll find some favorite spots for sure.
Excellent. And I know that you also enjoy cooking. Are there any particular dishes that you found yourself making often during the pandemic?
So I think I got into cooking during the pandemic. So I can't say that I have any favorites. I love just finding a random cookbook, whether it's at a library or at a cafe, and just flipping through it. And I must admit, I'm quite a sucker for pictures. So if it looks fantastic, I will most certainly make it. The other day I made just lettuce wraps, which were great. And it was fantastic. Simple, easy, very nice.
Well, I'm like you. I'm a visual reader. So I know the reason that you weren't back in the States until last October is because you have probably the most interesting COVID story. You were in New Zealand from February 2020 until October 2021. Tell us about that experience.
Yeah, totally. So in 2020, I decided that it was in my best interest to step away from grad school, and I took a formal leave of absence, and it was supposed to last an entire year. And I was going to travel. So I bought a one-way ticket to New Zealand. It happened. And I got there, and within a month, the world kind of shut down, and I decided to kind of stick it out and see what would happen. And honestly, one of the best decisions I have ever made. New Zealand is a fantastic place. I highly recommend it if you haven't been. I learned a lot of personal growth, and yeah, it was a beautiful country and I had a great time. I did end up going back to school starting in the summer of 2020. So I only took a semester off. But yeah, it was a great time. I could talk for ages about it.
Well, is there one story that you want to share with us today?
Sure. So New Zealand is very, very, very friendly, almost kind of wildly friendly. And I remember once when I was in between leases, I was actually living out of my car, which sounds awful, but it's like a very common thing to do. But I was just kind of traveling around, and I was sitting at a cafe, and I was at a community table, and I just started chatting with some of the people next to me. And one of the women that I was chatting with, I mentioned that I was in between houses, and I was thinking I wanted to move here, but I wasn't sure. And this woman who I just met goes, "Oh, well, I have a townhouse and I need a new tenant. Do you want to move in?" And so right there on the spot, I found a new place to live. I moved in a couple of weeks later. And yeah, her name is Colleen. We're good friends. We still chat. And yeah. It was
Wow.
kind of surreal.
Totally. Well, I'm so glad you had a good experience, but with a very unexpected itinerary.
Very.
Rachel, thank you so much for being with us. I'm sorry, Amanda, thank you so much for being with us today. I jumped ahead. Thank
All
you.
good. Thank you.
Next up, indeed, we have Rachel Havernack. The title of her presentation is Lessons from Our Past, Using Rocks to Predict Our Future. Rachel is a PhD student in geological sciences.
Like a lot of scientists my age, I grew up loving the magic school bus. I loved that the school bus could take me on an adventure to spaces and places that were hard for me to imagine. Today, as a geologist, rocks are my magic school bus. They take me on an adventure to strange and fantastic places in Earth's history. Part of my dissertation focuses on a set of rocks that take me back to a time 56 million years ago, when Wyoming was a warm, humid forest and looked a lot more like Northern California or Oregon today. But that environment was starting to change. Volcanoes were belching vast amounts of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, and the planet started warming up fast. What was once a rich forest in Wyoming turned into a dry environment filled with things like palms and small flowering plants. And while we've learned a lot about that climate change event from fossil plants, fossils are rare and really hard to find. So we're left with a ton of questions. So instead, I've turned to something that's much easier to find, a mineral called calcium carbonate. Now you probably know calcium carbonate because that's what makes up limestone and marble, and most of what you might take for an upset stomach, Tums. In the picture from Wyoming on the left, it's possible to find small clumps of calcium carbonate in each one of those red, purple, and white stripes. Each one of those stripes is an ancient soil, and so if I look at carbonate from each layer, it's kind of like I can watch climate change on land through time. It's like our magic school bus can take us on a field trip that's 200,000 years long in a single day. So I take those small clumps of calcium carbonate back to the lab, and I look at their chemical composition in detail. And in particular, their oxygen composition tells us both about the temperature of the landscape as well as about precipitation patterns. But unfortunately, our translation dictionary to go between landscape conditions and the chemical composition of carbonate isn't perfect. So the other part of my dissertation has been writing a translation dictionary. and joining a long tradition of geologists studying the modern environment so that we can better decipher our past. To write my translation dictionary, I set up monitoring stations like the one in the bottom right, where I collect a whole host of environmental data like temperature and relative humidity, and importantly, the chemical composition of rainfall. So I can compare that to the chemical composition of carbonate from the very same soil. You can see an example of one of those carbonate clumps in the top right image. I'm especially excited to learn about how environmental conditions are recorded by carbonate, because then when we take our field trip to the past, we can learn things like how do precipitation patterns change in the Western US when the climate warms fast. This is important to us now because it could help ensure that we have secure food and water resources as Wyoming warms in the future. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Rachel, so much for that. Like Amanda, I know that you enjoy cooking and were inspired by watching the Great British Bake Off show to expand your baking repertoire. What have you been making recently?
Nothing good, but trying my best. I binged a lot of Great British Bake Off during the pandemic, and so I was already a baker. My grandma made cookies with me a lot growing up, but after watching Great British Bake Off, I was like, I have to learn puff pastry. I have not made a successful puff pastry yet, unfortunately, but I am trying. It's getting better. Yeah.
Well, yeah, exactly. Some of these skills you don't get overnight. You have to just keep practicing.
Yeah.
So before coming to graduate school, you were a ski instructor for 3 to 6-year-olds.
I sure was.
Do you have a favorite story that you want to share with us from that experience?
I think so. I have 2 favorite stories. So we'll see how much time we have. I'll share the first.
Yeah,
so the first is that little kids are wildly flexible. And so they fall over a lot and they're totally fine. But one time I was on the magic carpet, which is like our small carpet where kids can just do a short run, learning to stop. And this poor, very adorable 3-year-old was going down and he was in a perfect pizza, but unfortunately his head was like stuck between his legs because he didn't have enough core strength to stand back up. And so he was just skiing, like kind of looking backwards behind his legs, just giggling the whole way down the run. It was very, very cute.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, and it's so great that he's giggling.
Yes, he was like totally fine with it. No problems. I picked him up to the bottom. I was like, you good, bud? And he was like, yeah, whatever. Put me back up.
Oh, we totally have time for another story. Go for it.
And then I think my other favorite lesson I ever had was a private lesson with a 4-year-old who was obsessed with Star Wars, like knew the names of characters I did not even know were named. And I have no idea how she learned them. And neither did her dad. Like she would say things like, oh, we got to go find so-and-so in the woods. And I'd be like, yes, let's go find them. And it'd be some like obscure stormtrooper or something like that. It was, so we spent probably 2 to 3 hours going on a Wookiee hunt, looking for Wookiees in the woods of Keystone.
You know, like you do.
Like you do. Yeah, absolutely.
So one of the random facts in Rachel's biography is that after a hard high school swim practice, she ate 2 Chipotle burritos and a bag of chips in one sitting. So Rachel, I have to ask you, what kind of Chipotle burritos did you consume that day?
It was a while ago, but I would probably say one was chicken and one was veggie.
That's impressive. That's really impressive.
We swam a long ways. It was the whole thing. Yeah.
Well, and when we're younger, we have a higher metabolism. We can eat like that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, Rachel, thank you so much for joining us today. It was a pleasure to hear your thoughts.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Perianne Johnson. Her presentation today is Pluto weather forecasting. Perianne is a PhD student in astrophysical and planetary sciences.
Rest in peace, dear Pluto. When I was in school, there were 9 planets. Why did scientists kill Pluto? As a planetary scientist who studies Pluto, comets like these are the bane of my existence. In 2006, Pluto was famously downgraded to dwarf planet, but I hope to convince you today that this was a demotion in name only, and that the X planet is an excellent body to study. In essence, I'm a Pluto weather forecaster. I use a mathematical model to predict Pluto's temperature as a function of time over its orbit. Talk about an extended forecast. Scientists didn't discover Pluto's atmosphere until the 1980s, so we only have data for about 10% of a Pluto year. In 2015, NASA's New Horizons mission revolutionized our knowledge of Pluto, but still only provided a single snapshot in time. So models like mine are needed to fill in the gaps and go beyond current observations in order to predict how Pluto's temperature will change in the future. I probably don't need to tell you that Pluto is very different from Earth. Currently, its atmosphere is 100,000 times less thick than Earth's, and its surface temperature is minus 400 degrees Fahrenheit. Ice and snow on Pluto aren't made of frozen nitrogen, but aren't made of frozen water, but are instead frozen nitrogen. All of this, combined with the lack of data, means that we don't understand how Pluto's climate will change. Yet another thing we don't know about Pluto is where all of the ice in the all the ice on its surface is. The southern hemisphere has been in polar night and thus unobservable for decades, so we don't know if there's ice there or not. This is like trying to predict the weather for Antarctica, but not knowing if it's covered in ice or if it's actually a tropical paradise. So for my thesis work, I investigated several hypotheses about where the ice in the south might be, such as a polar cap. For each hypothesis, I used my model to create a forecast for Pluto's temperature over its orbit. This is shown as the white lines on my slide. These forecasts are similar to what you might get in your phone's weather app. They tell us when to expect heat waves, shown by the suns, and when to expect cold fronts, shown by the snowflakes. From this work, I was able to conclude that there couldn't be as much ice in the south as we see in the north, but exactly where the ice is remains elusive. However, by continuing to observe Pluto over the next decade or so, we should be able to nail down where the ice is. We will know when the temperature begins to decrease, which is something that differs between hypotheses. Observing this tipping point will tell us what the temperature on Pluto will be during its winter in the 2020s and where the ice in the unobserved southern hemisphere is, something we wouldn't know otherwise for the next 100 years. Pluto isn't just a dirty snowball floating through space unchanged forever. My research shows that it has winter and summer seasons, just like Earth, and this will cause strong winds that are capable of carving mountains or painting its surface in brilliant colors. X-planet, dwarf planet, whatever you want to call it, just know that Pluto isn't dead. Thank you.
And thank you, Perianne, for making a case for Pluto. So like Amanda and Rachel, I know that you enjoy baking and cooking. So what favorite dishes have you been up to lately?
So most recently I made some coconut macaroons. I had an Olympics opening ceremony watching party with some of my friends, and they enjoyed the coconut macaroons as much as I did. So.
Oh, I'm sure. Sounds fantastic. As a former dancer myself, I have to ask how you got into competitive Irish dancing when you were a kid in California.
Yeah, so I started out doing tap and ballet, like a lot of young kids do. And then when I was in middle school, we actually had just moved to Chicago, which has a large Irish American population. And I was just sort of ready for something different. So I switched into Irish dancing. And I have a slight Irish ancestry myself in my family history. So it was just the perfect fit.
Excellent. Now, I know that one of your COVID coping strategies has been to take up watching Formula One car racing. Perianne now gets up at 6 or 7 a.m. most Sundays to watch the races in Europe and the Middle East. Where did this new interest come from?
So there's a Netflix documentary about Formula One racing that came out during the pandemic, and it was pretty much designed to get more Americans interested in the sport because it doesn't have a large American fan base. And I just really liked the documentary. It was really interesting, and it got you absolutely prepared to like immediately watch an F1 race and know what was going on and who were the favorites to win and all the rules and stuff like that. So I've just never looked back.
Wow. And what drivers are on your favorite list right now?
So my favorite driver is called Daniel Ricciardo. He races for the McLaren team. So, yeah.
Wow, well, good for you. I don't know that I'll join you at 6 a.m. on a Sunday morning, though.
It's tough. Usually the 6 a.m. ones I do end up like recording and then just staying off of social media so the race doesn't get spoiled for me.
Right.
But the 7 a.m. ones I pull myself out of bed to watch.
Well, and thank you, Perianne, for your thoughts today on making a case for Pluto.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Varsha Kaushik. Her presentation today is Empowering People with Cognitive Disabilities Through Adaptive Interfaces. Varsha is a PhD student in computer science.
Meet Lisa, a 25-year-old woman with cognitive disabilities who loves cooking, playing video games, and following her friends on social media. Because of her disabilities, she currently lives in a community home with her caregiver, Sally, but she hopes to be independent someday and work at a coffee shop. She has difficulties in remembering things, planning, making decisions, and lacks the motivation to do essential everyday activities that are tied to independent living, like brushing teeth. She needs stepwise instructions to brush her teeth. She needs to know how long she has to brush her teeth, and she needs constant feedback to know if she's doing something wrong and how she can correct herself. Because of all these needs, she's using an iPad that shows her a list of steps to follow. But this strategy has 3 problems. 1, it causes distractions. Lisa has to constantly pause brushing her teeth to see steps on a separate device. 2, it's very passive. It tells Lisa what the steps are and hopes she will do it correctly without any feedback. 3, it's quite tedious and makes brushing teeth boring. Lisa already lacks the motivation to brush her teeth, and all the iPad shows her is a list of steps in text and images. Can Lisa have her favorite celebrity Drake sing to her while she brushes her teeth? No, not right now. People like Lisa do really well when they receive support in real time on a fixed device and can personalize that support to their individual needs. What does that mean? Imagine Lisa standing in the bathroom in front of a smart mirror where Drake talks to her and motivates her to brush her teeth. I am building Activity Mirror, an augmented reality smart mirror that supports people with cognitive disabilities in their everyday activities. You can see on the slide that this mirror is no ordinary one. It solves all the 3 problems that we talked about. 1, it is fixed, so it reduces distractions. Lisa doesn't have to worry about bringing a device into the bathroom every time she brushes her teeth. 2, it gives Lisa constant feedback through augmented reality. It gives her stepwise instructions and helps her track progress. 3, it makes brushing teeth more enjoyable through avatars, animations, memes, and games. So maybe one day Lisa chooses Drake to motivate her to brush her teeth. The next day she chooses Jamie Oliver to teach her cupcake recipes. Activity Mirror can not only support people during brushing teeth, but it can also support other everyday activities like cooking or cleaning. My research has developed a design that can empower people with cognitive disabilities to customize support, and this work can lead to more adaptive assistive devices in the future. Thank you.
And thank you, Varsha. Like Obaya, I know that you grew up in India. You note in your bio that one of your favorite breakfast foods is Karnataka, which sounds delicious. Please describe that dish.
Oh, I meant like the breakfast dishes from the state I belong, Karnataka. I enjoy most of the breakfast items that are made there, and they're all lovely.
Do you have one in particular that you?
Yeah, I particularly like one. It's called roti. I guess spelled ROTTI, I suppose. Maybe not phonetically, but that's something that when I visit home, I make sure to have a lot of that.
And can you describe it?
It's I'm trying to think of I would say it's like a tortilla that's roasted filled with veggies that's sort of roasted on a wok like pan, and it's served with like a dip or a chutney.
Sounds delicious. Sign me up. Oh, Varsha, what got you started in competitive swimming?
I started swimming when I was 4 years old. It started out as a hobby, and very soon it became, I was competing in it.
And how many days a week can we find you in the CU pool?
Not as many as I'd like to be in.
It's hard when you're a graduate student to make that time.
Yeah, I'm much slower than very, very slow right now compared to how fast I was as a kid. And and I don't swim often now either.
Well, I know that one of your COVID coping strategies was to take up baking British savory pies and Terran shares. So what kind of savory pies do you make?
They're various kinds of them. So there's one that's you make a curried veg pie. You stir fry all the veggies, add some spices, and you can bake them. There's one potato and peas based Terran share that I learned from British chefs to make. So they're both like, it's nice when you're hosting, and it's a very nice food. It's very nice to have that.
Oh, sounds amazing. You know, I'm amazed at so many of our finalists today are chefs and bakers. I will confess that in my graduate school days, my cooking repertoire was pretty much limited to instant ramen and microwave burritos. So I'm really jealous of this particular crop of adventurous bakers. Varsha, tell the audience what a tear and share is.
A tear and share is just this big baked, they look like cinnamon rolls that are attached together, but that's how they look. But then they're filled with something, either a lot of times savory stuff, but you can have sweet things too. And then it's meant to be shared. So you pull it out and then dip it in some kind of a dip or a sauce and then eat it. But it's definitely meant to be shared by more than two people.
Perfect. Thank you, Varsha, so much for your presentation today.
Thank you.
And next up, we have Sarah Guavivas Manzano. The title of her presentation is The Language of Motion. Sarah is a PhD student in computer science.
If I ask you to touch your pinky and thumb together, you probably don't have to think too much about it. You can do this because nature allows you to predict your motion based on knowledge of your body and with the help of your sensory neurons. This remarkable capability is called proprioception. When we're born, our knowledge of proprioception is very limited. This is why babies flail their arms and legs around. But trial, error, genetics, and our daily activities help us refine our proprioception as we grow. Without good proprioception, we couldn't absent-mindedly grab a cup of coffee, walk up the stairs, or climb a mountain. Now, picture a robot. I bet you imagine something like WALL-E. Hard plastic shells, metallic components, definitely not rubber-like structures. But what if I told you that roboticists also make robots out of squishy and pliant materials, such as silly putty or a t-shirt? The field that studies this kind of robots is called soft robotics. It solves many difficult problems, ranging from exploring dangerous terrains to performing surgery. The brains of soft robots are very tiny computers that adapt to the twisting and warping of the robot because of their small size. These computers do not have significant power requirement or memory capacity. In my dissertation work, I have enabled soft robots with the capability of proprioception so we can control their motion with finesse. I have achieved millimeter accurate motions by teaching the robot its proprioception. But now I want to make this knowledge evolve over time. I informed the soft robot of an initial set of positions. Once these are fully known, the robot learns its motion from new sensor data it has never seen before. The key to making soft robots that can learn over time with such tiny computers is handling what they remember. Only data that adds significantly new information is kept. I embed more than one tiny computer onto the soft robot. Each computer is the specialist over a body part of the soft robot, but the computers can talk to each other. I take inspiration from the octopus, which has one mini brain per tentacle. This allows, as the experiment goes by, for the computers to handle failures or missing part of the body and still have the robot learn. Proprioception has helped humans forever be great surgeons, astronauts, and even martial artists like me. Now, proprioception in soft robots will further help humans navigate terrains they have never been to before, such as the center of a volcano or planets human life has never visited. Thank you.
And thank you, Sarah. I think I can safely say that Sarah is the only graduate student in our computer science program who also went to flight school. Indeed, she's the first Dominican woman to fly a plane powered 100% with ethanol. How did this come to be?
Yeah, actually, that was a really funny story. So I was, back then there was a new foundation that tried to make like green flight happen for private pilots, flight. And there was a queue of 3 of my friends. And even though I gave them a ride to a very far place to go fly, they did rock, paper, scissors to see who won, like who would go first and fly. So the airplane was full with regular gas, regular fuel. But as my friends, flew before me, and I was waiting there in the hangar, they filled up the plane completely with ethanol. And my flight instructor said, well, congratulations, you're the first Dominican woman to fly with 100% ethanol.
Wow, that's amazing. As you heard Sarah mention, she is involved with martial arts. Indeed, she is a jiu-jitsu women's coach. This might be the only time today that I'm glad we're in a virtual space, because I'm not going to ask you to demonstrate anything, but I'd love to know how you got into this sport.
Yeah. So my origin story is a little bit sappy. I was mugged in Dominican Republic, and I was suggested to do jiu-jitsu, and I've loved it ever since. I started the sport just for self-defense, but now it really has helped me through my PhD journey. I think jiu-jitsu is the reason why I haven't lost my mind doing the PhD.
It's imperative to have outlets like that, absolutely. So just to make sure everyone has a really good appetite for dinner this evening, I'm going to ask Sarah to describe for us one of her favorite dishes from the Dominican Republic, moro de habichuelas.
Moro de habichuelas. I love my mom's moro de habichuelas negras. My mom is watching right now from the Dominican Republic. Mami, te quiero. My mom's moro is very good. Everything else is acceptable. And and yeah, it's rice and beans, but in a different format. You cook the rice, and as you're cooking the rice, you throw in the beans, so it's not like 2 entities, but it's like one. I don't know, it tastes better. You put some olive oil in it and like cabbage, and it's even better.
Well, it does sound amazing. And I'm so glad that your mother is able to join you today.
Me too.
Well, thank you, Sarah, for your presentation.
Thank you.
And next up, we have Molly McDermott. The title of her presentation is Parenting Comes at a Cost. Molly is a PhD student in ecology and evolutionary biology.
Thanks, Bud. Any parent out there will be familiar with the idea that having children may come at a cost to your health. As a new mom myself, I know how having a baby cuts into time for sleeping. This trade-off between health and reproduction is a key idea that helps us to understand the evolution of species from elephants to frogs. Elephants, like us, have a slow pace of life. They have many years to reproduce, and they invest a lot of time and energy in parenting, so they have few offspring. In contrast, frogs are fast-paced. They have short lives and many offspring in which they invest little. Each individual has to balance their own needs with those of their offspring. This balancing act is universal among animals, including humans. Studying how parents allocate their time and energy is key to understanding the lifetime consequences for both parental and offspring health. My study species, the barn swallow, falls closer to frogs in their pace of life. Sadly, swallows across North America are declining. These birds are incredibly important, both ecologically and culturally. They eat hundreds of insects per day, and they're important symbols of luck, homecoming, and industriousness in various cultures around the world. They live about 2 years and have many young, but there's a lot of variation. Some females lay 3 eggs a year, others lay up to 15. That's twice their body weight in eggs. There must be a cost to having so many offspring. But what exactly is that cost? What happens in parents with many offspring versus those that have just a few? To answer these questions, we conducted an experiment where we increased or decreased the number of chicks that female barn swallows were caring for. Additionally, we attached a tag to half of these females, essentially a heavy backpack she had to carry around while taking care of herself and her young. Physiological responses to this set of conditions had never before been measured in a wild vertebrate. We found that females with tags had altered immune systems, and that those with tags or more chicks tended to be in worse health at the end of the experiment. But all females were equally likely to lay more eggs. This remarkable result tells us that female barn swallows will sacrifice their own health before they will reduce investment in reproduction. Studying the role of immune function in parental care can aid conservation efforts for declining species like swallows, and helps us to understand the potential costs of parenting in other animals, including humans. This experiment was very personal for me. I finished my fieldwork while 4 months pregnant. After long sleepless nights with my baby girl, I could easily understand how birds would do anything for their young, even at a cost to their own health. Thank you.
And thank you, Molly. One of Molly's hobbies is cycling, but in point of fact, Molly rode her bike from Washington to Alaska through Canada. So how did this 1,000-mile journey come to be?
Well, I did this bike trip right after graduating from college with 3 other friends. We kind of dreamed up this adventure as a celebration of graduating. Most of us were from Alaska, so it was essentially like moving back home, but we decided to do it on our bikes because why not? We all like to cycle, and it was beautiful country, and we trained and then we did it. It was great.
How long did the trip take?
It took about 3 weeks.
Wow, that's amazing. Before Molly entered the PhD program here at CU in eBio, she was a touring musician. What was your instrument?
I play cello and I sing.
Mm.
I played in a few bands throughout college and afterward.
And so tell us about that journey from musician to scientist.
It's always kind of been both for me, depending on what I'm spending more time on. So I knew that wasn't going to be forever, but I had some opportunities to play music and be a studio musician and also tour with bands. So I thought, why not? But I always really loved studying animals and working on biology, and I think that's what I wanted to do as a career eventually. So I came back to graduate school to pursue that.
And so I have to ask, have you written a song about your scientific work?
I have. I'm not going to sing them, but yes, that has been, there's always been crossover there, I guess.
Excellent. I love that. As a new mom, do you have any advice for your fellow graduate students who are anticipating the arrival of a new baby in 2022?
Oof. I am so new to it that I feel like all I can really offer other new moms is like commiseration and empathy. So, if you want that, I'm here for it. But yeah, I think it's a lot of fun. I guess the thing I would say is that people usually talk a lot about lack of sleep and the stress of balancing things. And while that's certainly the case, it's also a lot of joy and fun. So I think I would offer that it is a great thing to have a baby.
So did you perform your 3MT presentation for your daughter?
Oh, Lord, no, she's way too distracting and always wanting to get at the computer. And yeah, no, she provided an opportunity to take a break from work.
Got it. Very understood. Well, thank you, Molly, so much for your presentation today.
Thank you.
And next up, we have Anthony Pinter. The title of his presentation is Breaking Up and Moving On in the Social Media Age. Anthony is a PhD student in information science.
Breakups leave behind broken hearts and hurt feelings. After experiencing a breakup, we often want to distance ourselves from an ex-partner. In fact, research has shown that distance encourages healing and growth in the wake of a breakup. And after deciding who gets the couch you bought together, it can be really easy to never see an ex again. Online, however, we're left with the remnants of love lost, the pictures, posts, events, and connections that came about because of the relationship. On social media, this data is leveraged by algorithms to connect us to new people or events or remind us of past experiences. But of course, not every connection is wanted and nor every memory good. After all, the relationship did end. For example, what if I get a suggestion to add someone who's my ex's new partner? Or a memories feature surfaces a photo from that beach vacation that just the two of us took 2 years ago. My dissertation tackles this problem, asking how do people make decisions about and then subsequently manage that data, those digital possessions and connections that algorithms can leverage in the wake of a breakup. In other words, how might we redesign social media to improve my well-being and healing after a breakup? Experiences like these happen as a result of algorithms that can't tell what would actually be a bad recommendation by human standards. But in order to improve algorithmic understanding of experiences, to design algorithms that act more compassionately, we need to understand what people do or do not want regarding their data in the wake of a breakup. In my dissertation, I interviewed people who had had breakups or who are still together with their current partner to explore what they did or would do with that data after a breakup. Using that understanding, my dissertation identifies design issues and makes suggestions for how social media sites might fix them and subsequently improve user experiences. For example, my work has found out why some people delete everything from a relationship, while others retain everything. The features that exist on social media now are robust in supporting the deleters, but not the keepers. Retaining the data from the relationship enables those algorithms to make recommendations on that data. Understanding how people navigate the social implications of these decisions and how they technically achieve them within social media platforms is important because there are decisions that many people have to make as part of breaking up in the 21st century. And when I say many, I truly mean many. More than 4 billion people log on to social media a month. Disentangling your life from another person's, online or off, will never be a walk in the park. But my dissertation offers solutions to make doing it online a bit more like that couch. A tough decision, but one that will hopefully give people the distance they need to heal and move on. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. So, like Molly, Anthony is also a big biking enthusiast. Where are your favorite places to ride in Boulder?
So I live at the base of Sunshine. And so for those of you who are familiar, there's a pretty massive climb called the Sunshine Canyon Climb. And so I figured out that I can do that climb about midway up and cut across to another canyon and be back to my house in about 50 minutes, which is a pretty good midday ride during the pandemic.
Excellent. I understand that you also are a high school track coach. What do you enjoy most about being a high school track coach?
So I like teaching and mentoring broadly. And when I talk about the way that I teach, I often talk about coaching because it's kind of similar. So I coach high jump and the multi-events, and those are things that require failure. Nobody ever ultimately wins a high jump competition because everyone knocks the bar down at some point. And learning things like programming and coding websites is very similar, right? You have to fail along the way to learn. And so that's what I love about both coaching and teaching, is the opportunity to encourage people to step out of their comfort zone and take chances and fail, but fail in the service of ultimately succeeding.
Excellent life advice. My goodness. Do you have a favorite story from your time as a coach?
Yeah, actually. So I've coached this family of three, well, two athletes, and then there's an older sister. And the middle of the three was the last one out of states. So in Colorado, the top 18 in an event go to states. And during his last event, he was so close to getting it, but we managed to get a picture of him during his jump, or during one of his jumps. And I kind of looked back at, like, from when I was a high school athlete, and the pictures that I have, there was one where between my picture and his, it was exactly the same. Like the angle was the same, the way we were looked, and the air was exactly the same. And so that was a really neat moment to see an athlete really trust me and try their best and strive, and then to see, like, what I looked like 10 years ago was really, really funny and really exciting.
Well, absolutely. Since food is a major theme today, and you noted in your bio that you love a good deli sandwich, what are your favorite deli sandwiches?
So this is actually one of my icebreakers when I teach. Is I've lived in Colorado for 5 years, and I have yet to find a good, like, East Coast style deli sandwich. So if anybody in the audience, like, has a lead in the Boulder, Denver area, like, find my email and give me your recommendation, because I really haven't found one yet. But I love a good, like, turkey, cheese, spinach, onion, olive oil, just a plain old deli sandwich. That's actually one of my, like, post-dissertation plans, is to start making my own bread, like hoagie bread, and start making my own good deli sandwiches.
Excellent. Sounds like a perfect project for post-graduation. Thank you, Anthony, so much for being with us today.
Thank you, bud.
Next up, we have Sarah Schoonrod. The title of her presentation is A Smooth Path for Treating Growth Plate Injuries. Sarah is a PhD student in materials science and engineering.
Thank you. I'd like you to take a minute and reach back into your memory and picture your favorite playground as a child. Mine had a swing set on it that I would soar on. And right as I'd get to that highest height, I'd take a flying leap off. Now, my mom didn't love when I do that because she was always afraid I'd break a bone. And when I think back to all the kids I knew who had to get casts and got all the signatures, it wasn't that far-fetched to fear. And it's funny because when I was a kid, I pictured bone as just this hard white material. But I've come to realize it's actually a lot more interesting than that. For instance, in the ends of all the long bones of kids, so like their arms and their legs, there's a growth plate. And the growth plate's what's responsible for making those bones get longer. Now, what's interesting is although the growth plate lives in bone, it's not actually made of bone, it's made of cartilage. Now, what can happen is when the bone gets damaged, the growth plate does too. And although our bodies are fantastic at healing bone fractures, it's not so great with the growth plate. And sometimes it'll repair it with bone rather than cartilage. Now, this is a big problem because that bone in the wrong place can actually stop the growth plate from doing its job, which means that a child's arm or leg can start to grow at an angle or completely stop growing at all. Now, there are treatment approaches for it. In a best case scenario, a surgeon would go in and remove that unwanted bone and replace it with another material. That material is supposed to stop any more problematic bone from growing and let the remaining growth plate do its job. The issue is it only works for about 3 out of 10 kids, which means that for most kids, it's a pretty bumpy path to recovery, with the potential for multiple surgeries and the possibility of winding up with limbs of different lengths. So clearly, we don't have a solution, and we have a question. What if we had a material that instead of just stopping unwanted bone growth, we could actually help to repair the growth plate properly? And that question is what my research investigates. I'm working towards developing a material that can do just that. Now, because our bodies contain a lot of water, the material I use does too. It's really a lot like Jell-O in many ways. And I try and figure out what additional ingredients I can add to that Jell-O recipe so that when the body's trying to fix the growth plate, my material makes sure it gets the job done right. This would mean there'd be one procedure. A doctor would go in and inject this Jell-O-like material directly at the injury and let the body do the rest. Ultimately meaning that a child with a growth plate injury, maybe from jumping off a swing, doesn't need to spend the next few years worrying about additional surgeries and what heights their bodies will reach, and instead can think about what heights they can reach in life. Thank you.
And thank you, Sarah, for that
Thank you.
presentation. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, Sarah.
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah, no, so sorry. While Sarah was raised in California, she was actually born in Johannesburg, South Africa. Do you remember anything about your time there?
It's mostly sensory memories, so kind of sounds or smells from like my grandmother's kitchen that I remember, because it was pretty little when we moved here. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, in your bio, you wrote that you enjoy photography.
I do.
Do you have a particular subject matter that you enjoy shooting?
I really like little things. So like the micro world. So like looking at butterflies or little bugs or flower petals. So it works out because I do a lot of cell imaging for the lab. And so sometimes I try and remember that I actually really love sitting for hours and taking pictures.
Excellent.
Yeah.
What turned you on to photography?
I think, so my family, I come from a family of artists. So my parents are musicians, my grandmother's a painter, and I sometimes feel like I have an artistic soul, but it's in a scientific body. And so I think photography is what really allowed me to allow that artistic component to come out. Because I'm not a great drawer. I drew my slide, but photography kind of allowed me to capture something in a moment the way, I don't know, I think that there's a puzzle, right? Because you see something and you're trying to find how can you get the camera to capture the emotion that you're feeling while seeing it. And I think that that's an interesting puzzle.
Absolutely. Like Molly and Anthony, Sarah is also big into biking, but she prefers trail biking.
Yes.
Where are some of the favorite places you like to hit the trails in Boulder?
So actually we wind up, my family and I, we go up to Wyoming. There's a place called Kurt Gowdy. And so it's kind of a interesting path. They can get a little harrowing at times. Not too harrowing because there's just some people who look like they're taking a dive off a cliff. So I'm not that crazy. But yeah, I like the distraction of the environment around me and just kind of exploring it that way.
Well, and it does require you to totally be in the moment.
Totally, exactly.
I totally hear you. Well, thank you, Sarah, so much for your sharing today.
Absolutely, thank you so much.
And next up, we have Amanda White. The title of her presentation is Lighting the Way for the Daniel K. Inouye Solar Telescope. Amanda is a PhD student in astrophysical and planetary sciences.
Astronomers learn things a little differently from other sciences. We can't just ask Jupiter to come down to the lab with us to run a few tests. In astronomy, the only data we collect is the color of the light that we see and the intensity or how bright that light is. Just about everything we know about space has been learned from the properties of light. And we can learn all sorts of things, like what a cloud of gas on Jupiter is made of, or how strong magnetic fields on the sun are. We can do all of this just by looking because light encodes the physical properties of what it interacts with in itself. And it's my job to help other astronomers decode the secrets in the light through polarization. You see, light is a wave that oscillates up and down as it travels Light is a wave that oscillates up and down as it travels. And by manipulating the oscillations with optics and measuring changes in intensity, I can tell you how the light is oriented. If all of the oscillations are in a single direction, then the light is polarized. Likewise, if the oscillations are randomly oriented in every direction, the light is unpolarized. And you've likely experienced this yourself if you've ever worn polarized sunglasses. If you were to look out at the surface of water with just your eyes, like the person here on the left, you'd notice a lot of glare. The surface is shiny and it's hard to see below. But as soon as you put on your sunglasses, it becomes quite easy to make out details beneath the surface. This is because your sunglasses are filtering out all the unpolarized light that is not oscillating vertically. Now, I mentioned that light can take on the properties of anything it interacts with, like your sunglasses or our telescope. That second one is a problem for astronomers who want to use polarization to learn about the properties of objects in space. And this is where I come in. I study how different materials that make mirrors reflective impact and change the polarization of the light hitting them. I do this for the Daniel K. Inouye Solar Telescope, or DKIST. It's the largest solar telescope in the world, and its big mirror will let astronomers measure details on the sun like never before. But we can only understand those details and their properties if we get the polarization just right. You see on the model here, light entering the telescope gets bounced around a lot. There are 15 or more pieces of glass between the sun and any one of the different detectors. As sunlight touches each part of the telescope, its orientation gets changed just a little bit, but this compounds with each bounce. And by the time the final image gets to our cameras, the polarization is different compared to when it left the sun. My work is on characterizing the behavior of the 10 mirrors on DKIST so that we can understand what polarization effects the telescope itself is having on our observations, back those out of the data, and discover the small secrets of the sun for the first time.
Thank you, Amanda. So I know Amanda enjoys playing tabletop role-playing games. What are some of your favorite RPGs?
My favorite RPG right now is Dungeons and Dragons. It's probably also the most popularly known one.
How long have you been playing?
I've been playing for about 3 years.
Mm.
Mostly through the pandemic.
Exactly. So have you been a master as well as a participant?
Yeah, I am a dungeon master for a game that runs every Thursday, and my group will be very glad this competition is over so we can start playing again.
Excellent. Well, I'm sure everyone is glad that this event is over just so that they can return to their lives. Yes.
Yeah.
I know that, Amanda, one of your COVID coping strategies has been to take up growing alocaceous plants from bulbs. How did you get interested in these tropical plants from the Philippines?
Alocasias are really interesting because they usually drop one leaf as soon as they grow a new one. So it's kind of like a challenge to get one to get really bushy. And I just kind of like the challenge of doing that.
And is that one of the plants behind you?
Yeah, this is an alocasia on my desk.
Just for Exhibit A.
Yes.
So, Amanda, I think you probably know what my next question is going to be. I know that you once cosplayed as the planet Jupiter at a New York Comic-Con. How did this come to be?
It was actually part of a form of outreach to go to Comic-Con dressed as a planet, and just like, it's a good place to start interacting with people, especially where costumes are kind of the norm. So it was like a fun way to just get out there and talk to people and talk about the planets.
Well, I know you mentioned Jupiter in your presentation. Are you attracted to Jupiter?
Jupiter's pretty cool, but I would have to say Saturn's my favorite planet. It's got the gorgeous rings, but Jupiter's up there too.
So do you have a favorite story in your role as Jupiter at Comic-Con?
Perry will like this one. I got a lot of people asking me about Pluto while I was Jupiter, and I had to explain to them why the decision was made and why it doesn't really mean much in terms of what Pluto is. That was probably the number one question I got while Jupiter is, what's up with Pluto?
So was Pluto included with your group or no?
I was the only one there at the time.
Oh, I see. Got it. Got it. Well, I'm sure you represented the solar system quite well. And thank you, Amanda, so much for concluding our competition today.
Thank you, Bud.
So, to our dear audience, let's give a virtual round of applause to our amazing presenters this afternoon. While the judges make their decisions, please vote on the People's Choice Award. The voting will be open for the next 10 minutes, and pretty soon you'll see a slide that will have the information of where you go on the web in order to cast your ballot. Thank you so much for your attendance today. We look forward to seeing you in about 15 minutes when we're going to announce the names of the winners. Once again, our first place winner today will receive $1,500 in research funds and the opportunity to represent CU Boulder at the Western Association of Graduate School competition, which will be held virtually in March. Our runner-up will receive $750 in research funds, and our People's Choice winner today will receive $500 in research funds. Thanks again for your attendance, and we look forward to seeing you back here in about 15 minutes when we announce the names of our winners. Welcome back, everyone. Our judges have made their decision, and we will get to that in just a second. I just want to remind you that the graduate school at CU Boulder has approximately 6,000 students from all around the world. Today, you have had a chance to hear from 11 of them. Multiply the genius you saw this afternoon times 545. 6,000 graduate students is a lot of brilliant and really talented human beings who are part of our CU community. We are so grateful for their presence in our lives. Remember, our first place winner is going to receive $1,500 in research funds. Our runner-up will receive $750, and our People's Choice winner will receive $500 in research funds. Thank you to our audience for joining us today and to our judges for making some really difficult decisions. It is now my honor to welcome back the Dean of the Graduate School, Scott Adler, to announce our winners.
Hi, all. Thank you. Thanks, Bud, for doing such a spectacular job
My pleasure.
with this evening's event. Yes, so this was amazing presentations. I was really fascinated by all of the students' research. I was equally fascinated by all of their hobbies and extracurricular activities. So we really do have an incredible bunch of graduate students. So we have, let me start with the People's Choice Award. And that goes to Sarah Manzano. Congratulations, Sarah. And for our two, it turns out we have a tie for our runners up. And we will give an award to both of them. And those two winners are Perianne Johnson and Anthony Pinter. Congratulations, both of you. Finally, our winner, who will get $1,500 in research funds and go on to the regional 3MT competition, is Varsha Kaushik. Congratulations, Varsha. Well done.
Thank you.
So thank you, everyone. And thank you, all of our competitors. You did a spectacular job. I hope this has helped you with your thesis and communicating your work to others. We really appreciate all the work that the graduate school staff put into this. Bud, and of course, our 4 judges this evening. We really appreciate all your work as well. Thanks, everyone. Have a great evening.